Hey guys, welcome back to Based MMA. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down Robert Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov and Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. And the reason why I'm not doing a full card breakdown is because honestly guys, I haven't had the time to go back and do some tape study, and I don't want to give you a half-ass breakdown and prediction for some of these fights. So I'm sure if you want to watch a full card breakdown, go watch Lucas Tracy, go watch MMA Guru, go watch some of these other channels that do full card breakdowns and predictions. I myself, I'm only going to talk about the fights that I'm truly excited for, and that is the main event, Robert Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov and Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off with the co-main event, Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. Two best friends fighting. Huge respect to both of them. And if we're being honest, this probably shouldn't be the fight that's happening. It probably should have been Sergey Pavlovich versus Surreal Gon, but we know Surreal Gon is an absolute bitch. He's an absolute dog. Doesn't want to fight any actual contenders. Just wants to get easy fights with Sergey Spivak and fucking Marcin Tybura and probably fucking Jilton Almeida. But respect to both these guys for fighting each other, because this is a very exciting fight. I think this is a very interesting matchup. The fact that they're two best friends, I think is pretty interesting. Not a lot of fighters are willing to do this. I mean, we know Marab and Aljo didn't want to fight each other because they're two best friends. They're fucking pussies. But here we have two Russian Chads in Pavlovich and Alexander Volkov who are willing to fight each other to get to the top of the heavyweight division. So huge respect to both these guys. I'm a big fan of Pavlovich. I'm a big fan of Alexander Volkov. So huge respect to both these fighters. But who do I think is going to win this fight? I think this is a very interesting fight. I see a lot of people picking Sergey Pavlovich by first round knockout. And I'm going to do the same, man. I'm going to do the same. And I'm going to pick Sergey Pavlovich by first round knockout. Nothing against Alexander Volkov. I think he's a very good fighter. I think Volkov is actually one of those fighters that's kind of hard to knock out because he's so tall. But even though he's a taller fighter in this fight, Pavlovich still has an advantage with his reach. He has an 84-inch reach. Alexander Volkov has an 80-inch reach, so he has a 4-inch reach advantage in this fight, even though he is a shorter fighter. And Sergey Pavlovich, he's a guy, he's actually my favorite heavyweight. And I think even though Sergey Pavlovich is my favorite heavyweight, I do think he's a little bit overrated. I think he's actually pretty one-dimensional. Sergey Pavlovich hits very hard and has very good boxing. And that's about it. That's Sergey Pavlovich in a nutshell. He has pretty good boxing. He has a lot of power. He's built like a fucking fridge. And that's it. And I understand that it's a heavyweight division, so Sergey Pavlovich doesn't need to be super well-rounded to have success in the heavyweight division. If you have power, if you're fast, if you have good boxing, you could get far in the heavyweight division. And even though I think Alexander Volkov is probably the better mixed martial artist, Sergey Pavlovich's power in boxing is just going to be too much for Alexander Volkov. I think that if Volkov perhaps is able to survive that first round, he could frustrate Pavlovich with the teep to the body, with the low kicks, with the range, perhaps mixing the takedowns. But even mixing the takedowns against somebody like Sergey Pavlovich could be a little bit dangerous because Volkov is a taller fighter. He's going to have to duck a little bit more. I don't think he's stronger than Sergey Pavlovich. He could get cut by an uppercut. And Volkov, like I said, I don't think he's the strongest fighter. I don't think he's going to be a stronger fighter in this fight. So I don't really see Alexander Volkov attempting takedowns here. I think this fight is going to be on the feet. And because the fight is going to be on the feet, I just think Sergey Pavlovich is going to be a little bit too fast. Volkov doesn't have the best striking defense. His striking is all right. He has pretty good kickboxing. He could frustrate Sergey Pavlovich, but he just doesn't have the speed or power of somebody like Tom Aspinall, who was able to knock out Sergey Pavlovich in the first round of his last fight, right? I just don't see Alexander Volkov being able to do that. And because of that, I just think at some point Sergey Pavlovich is going to be able to land that onslaught of punches and just finish Alexander Volkov. Perhaps the fact that they're friends maybe changes the dynamic of the fight a little bit more. Maybe Sergey Pavlovich takes it a little bit easy, but I think Sergey Pavlovich really wants a win after losing to Tom Aspinall, because before Sergey Pavlovich had lost to Tom Aspinall, I mean, Pavlovich had all this aura. I mean, first round knockouts on a crazy win streak. People were talking about Pavlovich versus John Jones. John Jones doesn't want to fight this guy. And I still think Pavlovich could beat John Jones. Call me fucking crazy. I think Pavlovich could beat John Jones today. I know a lot of people hopped off Pavlovich's hype train because he lost to Tom Aspinall. But Tom Aspinall is an anomaly. He's huge. He's fast. He's very well-rounded. So there's no shame in losing to somebody like Tom Aspinall. I just think stylistically, he was always kind of a tough fight for Sergey Pavlovich. And even Sergey Pavlovich was able to land on Tom Aspinall. And Tom Aspinall just fucking ate the punch. You know what I'm saying? So I just don't see Volkov being able to threat Sergey Pavlovich with anything really. I just don't see that happening. Maybe he could win based on a decision, based on volume, if he's able to pull Sergey Pavlovich out of that second and third round. And perhaps if Pavlovich, has an energy dump after the second and third round. I mean, not after the second, during the second and third round, because this is only a 3-round fight, then I could see Volkov getting some momentum and winning the fight. But I don't see it, man. I'm going to go with Sergey Pavlovich to win by a first round knockout. Now we have the main event between Robert Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov. And if you guys are not aware, I'm pretty sure you guys are if you're watching this video, Robert Whittaker was supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev had to pull out of that fight because he was violently ill in the hospital. Ikram Aliskerov is stepping in on short notice, but Ikram Aliskerov was already preparing for a fight last weekend against an NPC, and the UFC scrapped that fight and moved Ikram Aliskerov to face Robert Whittaker. So in that sense, it's not really short notice for Ikram because he was already preparing for a fight, but he wasn't preparing for this caliber of a fight against Robert Whittaker, while Robert Whittaker was preparing for a 5-round fight against Khamzat Chimaev. So I think that's very relevant. That's a huge advantage for Robert Whittaker going into this fight. And I'm glad the UFC made this fight. I know people were complaining that Ikram Aliskerov doesn't deserve this opportunity. He's an unranked fighter, but the UFC did not have a lot of options. Look, Sean Strickland just fought. Nassourdine Imavov just fought. Jared Cannonier just fought. Kamaru Usman, I don't know if they just didn't want to, give another opportunity for Kamaru Usman. Maybe they already have a fight lined up for him, maybe against Shavkat Rakhmonov, since we know JDM is still dealing with his infection. So the UFC decided to call Ikram Aliskerov to step in on short notice to fight Robert Whittaker. And I absolutely love this fight because even though Ikram Aliskerov only has 2 fights in the UFC, I think he's a very good fighter. I think he's going to be a ranked middleweight at some point. And I think the UFC believes that as well, which is why they keep matching up Ikram Aliskerov versus Nassourdine Imavov. They matched him up against Paulo Costa. That fight fell through as well. So I think that the UFC truly believes that Ikram Aliskerov is a top middleweight. And I do believe so myself. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I haven't really watched that many of Ikram Aliskerov fights. I've watched his 2 fights in the UFC. I've watched his fight against Khamzat Chimaev, and I watched another fight in the regional scene. So I've only seen like 4 fights from Ikram Aliskerov. I know, he has 15-1, so he has 16 pro MMA fights, and I haven't watched every single one of them. So perhaps there's things that I say in this breakdown that maybe are not true, but based on those fights, I mean, Ikram has a pretty fast jab. He has a lot of power. He has a good right hand. He's not the most technical guy, but he's actually pretty technical. He has good striking defense. I don't know how his cardio looks like because obviously he knocked out Phil Rowe in that first round. He knocked out Warlley Alves in that first round. But based on what I've seen in those fights, he has a style that I think could be potentially dangerous for Robert Whittaker, who I know we say that a lot. I know we say this and every single time Robert Whittaker fights, my bad, that he has a bad chin and we're always questioning his durability. But I do question his durability. I'm a little bit worried here. I think people are underestimating Ikram Aliskerov. I know he's a pretty good grappler as well. I don't think that's really relevant here. I don't see Ikram, taking Robert Whittaker to the ground. I think maybe he attempts a couple takedowns here and there, especially if he starts to get frustrated with some of the striking, especially in those later rounds. I could see Ikram attempting some takedowns. I just don't see him being able to take down Robert Whittaker, who has pretty good takedown defense. I know he got taken down by Dricus du Plessis in their fight, but that was with a trip, so I don't see that happening here. I don't see Ikram, getting a trip on Robert Whittaker. Maybe he's able to do that up against the fence. I don't see that happening. I think this is going to be a fight on the feet. I think the later the fight goes, the better it is for Robert Whittaker because he has an advantage in the cardio. You know, he's been in that 5-round. He has that 5-round experience. He's going to be able to get his timing, get his pace. And every time Robert Whittaker is able to get into his pace, his timing, his striking, he beats the fuck out of guys. I know he doesn't have like this crazy power. I don't think he imposes like crazy damage, but he just outclasses guys. And I could see that happening here. The problem is that Ikram has pretty good power. He's built like a fucking fridge. He's wide. He's a very wide guy. He's a big guy. I just saw a picture of Ikram Aliskerov and the guy looks in pretty good shape. And I'm worried. And I know a lot of people are picking Robert Whittaker because, you know, he's the experienced guy. You know, we're all big fans of Robert Whittaker. He's fought the who's who of the middleweight division. He's coming off a pretty good win over Paulo Costa, even though I think he showed in that fight signs of declining. You know, he was a little bit more hittable in that fight. People love Robert Whittaker and they want to pick him. They want to see a fraud check of Ikram Aliskerov, and I completely understand that. Of course, I'm a bigger fan of Robert Whittaker than I am of Ikram Aliskerov. But I'm going to be bold here. I'm going to pick Ikram Aliskerov by knockout. I think at some point, he's going to be able to drop Robert Whittaker with a jab, similarly to what Dricus du Plessis was able to do. And I think the moment that Ikram drops Robert Whittaker and hurts him, he's going to get on top of him and he's going to fucking finish him. I just have that vision here. I think Robert Whittaker's karate blitz is a little bit too predictable now. I think if Ikram Aliskerov does his tape study, he's going to notice that every time Robert Whittaker, you know, does that feint and steps in with that karate blitz, he's able to time that jab and perhaps drop him. I think Ikram Aliskerov has pretty good striking defense. I think the pressure is pretty good from Ikram Aliskerov. Obviously, like I said, Robert Whittaker obviously has the experience, and I could see him, you know, winning those later rounds. And Robert Whittaker, if he wins this fight, in my opinion, it has to be by a decision. I don't really see him finishing Ikram Aliskerov. I know Khamzat Chimaev was able to finish Ikram, but Khamzat Chimaev has one-shot power. I don't really see Robert Whittaker having that kind of power in this fight. So I'm going to go with Ikram Aliskerov to win by a knockout. It's kind of a bold prediction because obviously Robert Whittaker is the most experienced guy, and he could go out there and fraud check Ikram Aliskerov. But I think Ikram is really good. I really think he's this good. I think he was already preparing for a fight. He wasn't preparing for this type of fight. I think Robert Whittaker is showing signs of declining. I don't think his chin is going to hold up in this fight. I think at some point Ikram Aliskerov is going to be able to find the shot and just finish him with that onslaught. I just saw Ikram's fight against Warley Alves, and I could see something similarly happening in this Robert Whittaker fight where he drops him with a jab. You know, Robert Whittaker moves back up against the fence, and then Ikram is able to, you know, maybe land a flying knee and maybe let go of his hands and finish Robert Whittaker up against the fence. I just see that happening here. And the problem with Robert Whittaker, even though he's a great striker, he's very technical, he's able to outclass guys, because he doesn't have that, I guess, threat with the power. It's hard for me to trust him because he's not going to sit in his punches. He's going to land a lot of volume. He's going to land pretty good combinations. But is he going to be able to hurt Ikram Aliskerov? Maybe with the low kicks, maybe with the oblique kicks. He's able to slow down Ikram Aliskerov and really hurt his legs and kind of slow him down on the feet. And if he's able to break down his legs, then obviously Ikram is going to lose a little bit of power in his shot. So I could see that happening. But I'm going to take a leap of faith here. I'm going to do a bold prediction and go with Ikram Aliskerov to win by a TKO. I'm going to go with second round TKO. I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. Maybe I get it wrong. People are going to be pissed if Ikram Aliskerov loses, and they're going to be like, oh man, you don't know anything about fucking MMA, man. How can you fucking doubt Robert Whittaker? I love Robert Whittaker. I just have this weird feeling that Ikram Aliskerov is going to get it done, guys. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you think of Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. Let me know what you think of the main event between Robert Whittaker and Ikram Aliskerov. I'm picking Ikram. You know, he's an underdog, but I don't think he's like the biggest underdog going into this fight. So I think some people actually agree with me that they just see Ikram Aliskerov winning this fight. I'm not like the biggest Ikram fan. Like I said, I've only watched 4 of his fights. And I just think he has a style that could be potentially dangerous against Robert Whittaker. Like I said, Robert Whittaker is obviously the more experienced fighter. But I'm going to take a leap of faith. I'm going to put a bold pick and not just do what everybody else does and just pick the favorite or pick the guy that's popular. I'm going to go with Ikram Aliskerov to win this fight.